Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel Vigil, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
What an emotional day in Broncos country, as on Monday, the Broncos released quarterback Russell Wilson, and we knew some other big names were going to follow. And today, this morning, it ends up being Justin Simmons. Essentially, the Broncos go on to thank Justin for all of his contributions, both on and off the field. Again, it's just one of those sad days where you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, the rebuild is actually happening this time for real. Andrew Mason, good morning.
Good morning. And I think you put it very well. This is a rebuild. They may not use the exact word, but I always say focus on what they do, not what they say. And when you are going up to someone who is still one of your best players and cutting him to get salary cap relief, and there are more moves coming, make no mistake, the Broncos are in the tear down stage of a rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know what's there he goes. All right, well, we will have him come back. I was gonna say, I feel like one of the there he is. One of the hardest parts about this, Mace, is for so many years, 6-7 years, it feels like we've been talking about rebuild, it's time to rebuild, and they never did it. They just tried to pick and pull different pieces and do all of those things, and it never ended up working. And so now here I am after 7 years of bad football, and I'm frustrated that the rebuild is finally happening, even though it's a necessity. It needs to happen, but we wasted 7 years. It just feels, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about all of this, to be honest.
Rachel, it's my belief that everybody likes talking about a rebuild in theory, but
no one wants to actually do a rebuild.
They blanch at it when you actually see what's done in a rebuild, right? Yeah. It's painful because there's the teardown part, and that means you're saying goodbye to people that, if you've been a fan that you love. I mean, Broncos country has a love for Justin Simmons.
Yeah.
I mean, he played 8 years, mostly very good football. I mean, it's going to be fascinating because he very well carried along the Broncos grand safety tradition that goes all the way back to Goose Gonsolin when the franchise started. I mean, you just go down the list of, players like, Billy Thompson, who played corner and safety, and Steve Foley and Dennis Smith and Steve Atwater, on through, John Lynch and Brian Dawkins, TJ Ward, and Darian Stewart in the no-fly zone. This team has had a nearly uninterrupted run of outstanding safety play going back decades, and Justin Simmons very much was in that lineage. And yet, you look back at his career, he arrived when they were cleaning up the party from Super Bowl 50, and he never got to the playoffs. Sadly, he's going to become one of the symbols, unfortunately, of a grim time in Bronco history.
It's funny because even though I am incredibly sad that the Broncos are going to be moving on from Justin Simmons because of everything that he meant to this organization, I'm actually really happy for Justin Simmons to be moving on, to hopefully go to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles or some other team that is already in the playoffs or a playoff contender, could possibly win a Super Bowl. He has so much talent. He saved this team so many times that I hope that team can utilize him in that way and help him win a Lombardi trophy.
Well, Rachel, look back this past season when the Broncos had to play a couple of games without Justin Simmons.
Oh.
And had to start Delarian Turner-Yell, and how that looked.
Yep.
I mean, he got injured against Washington in week 2, played the second half injured alongside Turner-Yell, who'd come in for Kareem Jackson when Jackson got tossed. And in week 3, the starting safeties were Kajak and Delarian Turner-Yell, and the result was literally giving up more points than any team had in nearly 57 years. And it didn't get any better for the first 3 quarters the following week in Chicago before they finally put it together. Now some of that was Turner-Yell really struggling because when they got PJ Locke out there and You had PJ Locke next to Justin Simmons. It looked pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so some of that was Turner Yell was just not up to the task.
Yeah.
But yeah, that they're gonna lose something. They're gonna lose that security blanket who, on the back end was helping others out. But that being said, he is going into year 9. And a fair question being asked of a lot of players and a lot of contracts is this: what is their value right now?
Mm-hmm.
And are they still with this team when it gets to the other side and is actually, hopefully, knock on whatever surface you can find, a perennial relevant contender?
Yeah.
And it's fair to say that Justin Simmons may not have been there. And also that in terms of overall value and positional value, he plays a spot at safety that doesn't necessarily have the highest positional value. And all you have to do is look at the flood of safeties that are hitting the market right now.
So many.
And some of them have been cut to reveal just where safety ranks in terms of positional value compared to, say, offensive tackle, because Justin Simmons and Garrett Bowles, their contracts free up roughly the same amount of room. Doesn't mean we may not be talking about Bowles here in the coming days, but it's very telling that it was Simmons first. Like, it would not at all surprise me if we get to the new league year and Garrett Bowles is still on this team, whether he's on his current contract structure or he even has an extension that reduces his cap figure for this year.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is positional value. Offensive tackle, particularly left tackle, has more value than safety. And oh, by the way, if you go for a young quarterback in this draft, the thing you want to do is make sure they're protected so they have a fighting chance. And you don't do that by taking a left tackle who last year was above average among starting left tackles, by taking a tackle and a key component of that number 8 pass block win rate offensive line out of the equation.
Safety and a cornerback are luxuries to a good team. If you're a bad team, you don't get the luxury of having either one of those players. You have to move on. But you mentioned, obviously, Garrett Bowles. What are some other names that you think could possibly be on the chopping block for this Denver Broncos team?
I think you'll see at least one move at wide receiver. Obviously, Tim Patrick is a restructure/cut candidate, and maybe even cut and brought back on a very much a prove it type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
I would honestly be surprised if both Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are on this team a week from now. I think you will probably see a move with one of them. DJ Jones is another name that's very much in play. Now, the interesting thing, Broncos really struggled on the defensive line last year, struggled in the front 7. That's a small part of why they chose not to bring back Jonathan Harris, because you could be looking at a reset along the defensive line as much as possible. If you bring back DJ Jones, it's an extension and reducing his cap number, but I would be surprised if he's on the team at this time next week. So you've also got some other restructures. I would not be surprised to see at least one restructure on Zach Allen, Mike McGlinchey, to create some space, a little more space for this year with Zach Allen, Ben Powers, Mike McGlinchey. These are players the Broncos do expect to play out their contracts.
Okay.
Thus, if you have that expectation, you can kick a higher number into the future, knowing that, okay, you got Ben Powers on the length of the contract. We expect him to play out that contract. So you can make that sort of move structure-wise to create some more room now, because even though you're not going to have oodles of cap space, they do want some space to make some moves. You obviously want to bring in a veteran quarterback at minimum, and then patch some holes here and there.
Wait. So you think they're going veteran over a draft?
No, I think they're doing both.
Okay.
I think
they're finding their bridge QB. That's not going to be Jared Stidham.
I think it's a competition between Jarrett Stidham and whoever they bring in.
Oh, geez.
Is what's going to happen.
How much can they afford to pay a veteran QB to come in? Like, what are we talking about here? Because they're still paying Jared Stidham a pretty penny. Obviously, you're paying Russell Wilson for the next probably 2 years, and we don't know exactly which cap number that's going to look like this year. So how much can you realistically afford to pay a bridge QB?
Jarrett Stidham's cap figure this year is $7 million.
Yeah.
I know Andrew Brandt, longtime salary cap expert, former Packers capologist on our air, talked about $10 million at the quarterback position. I think maybe the Broncos end up a little bit above that. So I think you're probably looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 million for whatever you bring, for whatever bridge competition you might bring in.
And which quarterbacks fit that number right now? Like, does a Sam Darnold even fit that number?
He may, just because there's a legitimate shot at starting. You see, one of the things that you can offer a quarterback, you can say, look, we only have this much, but here's a real opportunity to start and kind of rebuild your resume. It's basically, if you're looking for the next Baker Mayfield, it's kind of like that. Baker Mayfield had a very low cost contract. Mm-hmm. What the Bucs sold him on was opportunity.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold, low cost contract in San Francisco last year. They sold him on opportunity because Brock Purdy, remember, was coming off the elbow injury. Brock Purdy at this time last year, there was a legitimate question as to whether he's going to be ready for the season. And so Sam Darnold going there thought, okay, I can step right in. Now Purdy was healthy, ended up playing out the season. But this is the kind of thing the Broncos can offer, is that they can say, look, you've got a real chance to push and start. Mm-hmm. And if you do well, it may not be here, but you can get a bigger contract elsewhere. I mean, it's what Sean Payton did with Teddy Bridgewater back when he traded for him from the Jets. And Teddy goes in 2019, plays really well in relief of Drew Brees, and he parlays that into a significant contract with Carolina in 2020, right? So that's what you're trying to do here. You are going to pitch opportunity. If you're talking about a free agent quarterback, if you're talking about like trading for Mac Jones or maybe trading for Sam Howell, not that I think Washington would trade him away, because that's a really valuable piece, kind of like Jake Browning in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have those options in reserve. I think if you're looking at a free agent, you're selling them on saying, okay, look, I mean, we don't have much cap space right now, but we can give you a chance to play.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense. These guys are all competitors, you know what I mean? They want to be named the starting QB, even if it means you have to take a little bit less money. I do think it's going to be fascinating with how much they're playing Jarrett Stidham, how confident Jarrett Stidham was looking back at the end of the season, where he's like, I don't feel like I'm competing for a job. Like, he knew that the Broncos were going to move on from Russell Wilson and that he was going to be the starter. But it's going to be fascinating just to see what names kind of pop up when it comes to who could possibly be with the Broncos. We saw there's a report out today, Mace, that Russell Wilson and the Steelers are having conversation, which is interesting after Diana Rossini had come out earlier this week saying that the Steelers weren't interested in a veteran QB. I feel like we're just about to enter into this emotional roller coaster with a bunch of different names. And then, of course, if people still care where Russell Wilson lands.
The Steelers are an interesting domino, because if they decide to go with Russell Wilson, then Mason Rudolph becomes somebody who could come in and be in that competition. And I can feel people watching this and hearing me say that and cringe, like Mason Rudolph, Jarrett Stidham. I mean, if that's, you can only sell that to the public, Rachel, if there's a first round quarterback coming in April. Like, if you look, if it's Rudolph and Stidham and that's your competition, I mean,
we're screwed.
I
would want Teddy and Drew again. Bring me back to that.
But if you look over on the sideline and you look on the side field and you see JJ McCarthy working on stuff, Drake May working on stuff, even Bo Nix working, you could sell that. But if without I don't even think you could sell that with like a Spencer Rattler on day 2.
No.
I don't think you could.
Let's be honest, Mace. What is a rebuild? Truthfully, what's like the average time of a rebuild? Are we talking 4 years until you could possibly make the playoffs?
Not in the NFL.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Not in the NFL. No, not. It's not that long in the NFL.
So 2?
I think if you're saying rebuild, and today is in the tear down moment, First of all, and I said this on social media, I'm standing by it. I think unless you have the worst injury luck possible, I think the floor on this season 6-11. I think between special teams,
Really?
yes, between the team's special teams unit, there you will get up improvement out of young players forced out there. Not all of them will step up, but some will with playing time. It's not like you instantly say, "Oh, well, Riley Moss barely played last year. He can't do anything." He can get better with playing time.
Yeah.
Marvin Mims Jr. can get better with playing time. I mean, you can just go down the list, right? So to assume that what players are, young players who are probably going to be asked to step in, to assume what they are is what they're going to be is a fallacy, right?
Agreed.
And I think you'll see I think you'll see good offensive line play. I think you'll see good special teams. And you'll still have Pat Surtain at corner. And so you're going to basically take away one side of the field, as it were.
So you don't think the Broncos are going to move on from Pat Surtain at all?
No, not unless
they're not moving up in the draft then.
Not unless it's to move up to number 1. I think if they move up to number 3, Pat Surtain will not be involved.
So it's just a number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, we haven't even heard conversations about that. So
the winds are blowing. It would seem the winds are blowing back to Chicago, keeping that pick and taking Caleb Williams.
What a position that Chicago is in, though. If you really think about it, they're in such a good position. I think Chicago can actually be a pretty decent team. I think that they're just missing one or two pieces, and I just don't think Justin Fields was the guy. If Caleb Williams can go out there and be the generational quarterback that everybody thinks he can be, I don't think they're going to be super successful right off the bat, right? They're not going to go 4-0 right off the bat, but I do think that they're going to have a successful season.
I think their season may look like Green Bay's this past year.
Yeah, exactly. Mace, that is perfect comparison.
And even like Houston's, where it just, by the end of the season, as long as they didn't dig themselves too deep a hole early, I think they're in the playoffs. The NFC North is about to become really interesting. And you remember Dan Campbell after the NFC Championship game and how he was talking about, you don't know if this is your only shot?
Yep.
Now, part of it is because Dan Campbell is one of those people who I think he has a very high emotional intelligence and he understands the impermanence of things.
Yep.
But I think also on a football level, he knows that Green Bay's coming and he knows that Chicago's probably coming.
Yeah. Chicago has some good pieces.
They do.
They're just dysfunctional.
And they played well down the stretch last year. I mean,
they did.
You're right. Dysfunctional organization that is taking these steps to functionality, right?
Yeah.
But it's another franchise that has been in the weeds for most of the last, 14 years, really, since Lovie Smith and Jay Cutler had them in the NFC Championship game back in January of 2011, right? 2010 season. People forget, Jay Cutler, they're at home in the NFC Championship game against the Packers, and Jay Cutler gets hurt, and they put Caleb Haney out there.
Yeah.
And if Cutler doesn't get hurt, a lot of narratives are completely different.
Agreed.
If Cutler plays that game, I think the Bears win that game. But anyway, it's a fan base that kind of like the Broncos right now. They're used to believing the banana peel is perpetually around the corner, right?
Oh, man, do I feel that. And Mace, one of the big questions, too, that's been asked on social media and has pointed back to George Payton is George, you're failing, is why not trade Justin Simmons? Why not see what you can? And we talked a little bit about there's so many safeties that are available, so it doesn't make sense. But I also know it has a little bit to do with the cap room and having to make room right now.
Yes. They have to be in compliance a week from today. Crazy. Or a week from yesterday, pardon me, because today is Thursday. They have to be in compliance by I believe it's by 2 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday the 13th.
Oh,
I mean, and they're not there yet.
Yeah. That's why there's other big names that could possibly, like you said, get restructured or let go. It's just the gut punches aren't over yet.
Or trade it, but like a trade, you have to get all the I's dotted and T's crossed and everything aligned. I mean, I'd say the best trade candidate right now is Courtland Sutton. He does have value based upon his season last year. I don't think you're talking about extreme value. I mean, the hope was you could get a first round or a second round pick for Justin Simmons, but the glut of safeties, like that graphic you threw up on the show here earlier. There you go.
There's so many names on there.
Teams are looking at that list and they're like, oh, yeah, we don't need to trade for Justin Simmons when we can pursue Jordan Poyer, right? I mean, you just name whoever you want off that list. And so it's a supply and demand equation. There's a great deal of supply, and safety is not a premium position, so thus demand is low.
And I'm sure they probably did their due diligence, and they were like, would anybody sniff this? You know what I mean? And the answer was no. And I'm sure that's why it was just ultimately, okay, time to let him go. And we obviously all wish him the best. But I do think Courtland Sutton is probably on the move next with all of his Twitter or X antics that we saw this past week as well. Or was it last week? All of my days now are getting mixed up. I think it was this week. It just feels like there's so much going on. Every single day I turn on my phone and I'm like, okay, what's going to happen next? And like we talked about, that's kind of all part of the rebuild. Like so many things are going to change.
It's like, who took Broncos off their Instagram profile, right? That's
literally
what we are right now. Like,
how sad that that's where we're at. Mace, you've been covering this team for a long time. Is this one of the most dysfunctional times that you can remember, or is this just because it's so recent and fresh?
See, I think it's actually pretty functional because I can see a direction here.
So there's hope.
Dysfunction is the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing.
Yeah.
Dysfunction is coming off of 5-11 and 6-10 seasons and deluding yourself into thinking that Joe Flacco is about to enter his prime and then signing Jawan James to a big contract, right? And you look back, you talk about misalignment in 2019. You were 11-21 the previous 2 years. You're what's left of the Super Bowl core is getting older. And you bring in Joe Flacco, who gotten benched in Baltimore, and you think he could, that he's entering his prime. And then you bring in Jawan James, who every other year missed a slew of games to injuries. And oh, by the way, the pattern was that he was going to miss a lot of time in 2019 to injuries. And what happens, right?
Man.
Rachel, that's dysfunction.
So what you're telling me right now, Mace, is that you trust Sean Payton.
I trust him because there's a direction, and I think it's pretty obvious to see what that direction is. Okay. But that direction means a step back. I said a half step back on social media. It's a step back right now. I just think by the time we're sitting there at the end of the season, if you're looking at 6-11 compared to 8-9, it's not that far back. It's I think it was Buffalo the year they got Josh Allen. Where they went from 9-7 to, I believe, 6-10. And this is where if you get a quarterback, if you get JJ McCarthy and you identify, for example, and say, this is the guy we're going to ride with. If you fall back, if you go 6-11, but you identify who your long-term quarterback is, that's a successful season. And that leads you positioned to take a leap beyond that. One thing the Broncos know this, and they've got to solve this quarterback thing. And right now, like you see Justin Simmons on his way out. Quarterback. I'm going to sound like the late Tim Russert during the 2020 election saying Florida, Florida, Florida. I should have a whiteboard that just says quarterback. That's job number one. Identifying the quarterback who is going to lead this team out of its muck and get it where it needs to go.
Oh, more questions to be asked for sure about this Denver Broncos team. Plenty of great stuff coming from you and everybody over at denversports.com. Mace, I appreciate you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Good talking to you.
Of course. All right. Andrew Mason right there. Always love having him. He's such a joy. Him and Cecil do an amazing job on Orange and Blue today. Definitely make sure you go check that out. 4 p.m. every single weekday Mountain Time. Like I said, they do a fantastic job. And then, of course, I love hanging out with you guys every single day. Come hang out with us tomorrow morning. Denver Sports Daily. That is at 10 a.m. and right back here at 12 p.m. for another episode of Coffee Break. We're going to be doing a fun one tomorrow. It's going to be on a conspiracy theory that you have to dive into. Has to do with the Denver Nuggets. So plenty of good stuff. And we will see you guys all tomorrow morning. Have a wonderful Thursday, everybody.